Hello and thank you for watching the Angry Rooster Creations channel. Today we have another fountain pen related video, and we're going to be looking at this Majohn T5 fountain pen. Now you may somewhere at some point see this pen labeled or listed as a Moonman T5. Majohn and Moonman are the same company. Sometimes you'll see the pen listed one way or the other. In this case, this pen, the listing I bought it from, said Majohn. The cap band here on the pen says Majohn. So this is a Majohn T5. Now, the pen as you see it here is the matte black finished version of the pen. So this is a brass bodied pen that has a lacquered coating. Most of the videos that are on YouTube show the versions of this pen that have the sort of the glossy lacquer that has the ink blots. There is, let's see, I believe blue, green, and red, or it's really more of a magenta pink. It's called red in the listings, but it looks pink. I elected to go for the sort of less flashy matte finished version of this pen. Now this is a piston filler pen. You know, the finial at the back is the knob for the piston filler. And I'm not going to, showcase that because this pen currently is inked and I don't want to make a mess. But if you happen to have one of these piston wrenches, like this here is an Asvine branded piston wrench. On this one, it's the this outside notch here is the notch that fits this pen. So if you've got one of these sort of 4-in-1 wrenches, the largest notch is the one that works on the Majohn T5. And you can use that to fully disassemble the piston system on this pen for full-on cleaning or re-greasing if that's needed. Now this also has a size 6 nib. In the case of my pen, I was mentioning a little bit about the Majohn Moonman debacle. The nib itself says Moonman. So once again, like I said, they're the same company. This particular pen here has an EF nib, and it has a plastic feed. Now, the section here is plastic, as you can see. Now, it may be a little hard to tell, but that is a clear acrylic ink window. I have a black ink in this pen, so you're not really going to be able to see that. But if you have another, not so dark ink, you will actually see that your ink does show in the ink window here. Now, in the cap as well, once again, like I said, the body and cap are brass. The finial is plastic. As far as I can tell, this finial is apparently glued onto the cap. I have not been able to remove it to try and disassemble the cap. You shouldn't have any reason to do so, but just in case somebody is inclined to try to remove this, know that it's most likely glued. You would damage this if you tried to disassemble the cap. As far as the cap liner here, the cap has a full plastic liner. If I can get, I don't know how well it's going to show up in the light here. Maybe a little hard to see down in there. There is actually a step down in the liner that does appear to seat on the front end of the section here. Like I said, this is a full plastic liner, so there are plastic threads in that plastic liner that thread onto the plastic section threads here. So you don't have to worry about having plastic on metal threads. It is plastic on plastic, so you shouldn't have to worry about the cap threads wearing out over time, not as fast as they would if you had metal on plastic. The cap does post if you're somebody who is inclined to post. Now, I personally would not post this pin myself. I don't post this pin when I use it. Because it is a metal body and a metal capped pin, when you post this, it does tend to want to backweight the pin. In fact, with the cap posted just forward of the where the cap sits is where the balance is on the pin when this cap is posted, and that, when I hold the pin, is right where it rests on the web of my hand, so it's kind of neutrally balanced. And for me, I prefer a writing instrument that is weighted towards the paper, so for me, it is much more comfortable to write with this unposted. But if you are somebody that posting is mandatory, the Majohn T5 does post quite well. And I will state this, that when you post it, you don't have any metal on the lacquered metal body here. What touches is the plastic of that cap liner, and it actually kind of clicks or tightens up on this chrome trim ring. So you don't have to worry about the posting the cap disturbing the finish on your barrel of this pen. The cap here, it uncaps in 1 3/4 turns. Now, as far as the technical specs, when it's capped, the pen's about 5.5 inches in length. Uncapped, it's about 3 5/16 of an inch. Posted, it's 6 11/16 long. And at the widest point, which is right here, where the step is, where the cap seats, it's right at 5/8 of an inch wide. Out here at the end of in diameter, excuse me, at the end of the finial here, it sort of has a kind of cigar shape. It's not a straight taper. It tapers slightly to here, and then it tapers more severely from there back. Sort of give that cigar shape. At the end of the finial here, the end finial, it's 7/16 of an inch. The thinnest point of the grip, just right, or the section here, right there, is about 3/8 of an inch in diameter. Right here before the threads, about 7/16 of an inch in diameter. As far as the length of the cap is 2 5/8 of an inch. The grip length to the shelf, so from there to where the shelf where the cap seats, is 2 3/16 of an inch. Excuse me, 2 5/16 of an inch. And then from the front here to the end of the section to the start of the threads is about 7/8 of an inch. For me, myself, there is plenty enough grip length here. Now, I have I wear a size large glove. Width-wise, my hand is size medium. Finger length is size large. I don't have a problem holding this pen. It is not uncomfortable. There's plenty of grip length here, even if I wanted to extend the pen out. You would have to be holding in a very awkward manner, or non-typical manner, I should say, if you would find your fingers resting on the step down here where the cap seats. So you got a pretty generous grip length, and even then, if some reason you had your fingers ending up on the thread profile, the thread profile is quite minimum. These are shallow feeling threads, so they're not very obtrusive here, or obnoxious. And it's not, there's nothing here that makes this uncomfortable to hold as far as the grip section, in my opinion. And I think for the average person, the grip is of a suitable length to not cause any kind of issues or have any real hot spots for a typical grip on the pen. With my particular pen here, this is, like I said earlier when I showed it, this is an extra fine nib. Now, compared to other extra fine nibs that I have written with, this one is quite wet flowing. It's about the same lime weight as my Lamy Safari Extra Fine, but it is much wetter flowing. This one puts down much more ink than the Lamy Safari Extra Fine that I have, which is usually what I compare to when I mention about flow with nibs. And I have had this one for quite a while. As you can see, there is some damage to the finish. I'm recording this in July of 2025. I got this in January of this year. So I've had this pen for about going on 6 months. Or I guess 5.5 months or so. So it's got some use. So you will see there is some chipping and things, because I have carried this pen. When I bought this pen at the time of purchase, I got this on AliExpress. It was $13.60 and it had free shipping. Now, obviously, since I bought this pen, there have been things that have changed as far as global trade and availability and pricing and things. So last I looked, this pen model was $23 on AliExpress. Now, I didn't add it to a cart or anything, so I don't know what it would add in tax or what have you. I believe that listing had it with free shipping. Like I said, now you have to pay a tax on AliExpress if you're a US shopper. So, you know, it would cost more than it did when I bought it. And you can find this pen on Amazon for $29.99 with free shipping from a US distributor. So the shipping time would be shorter. But on Amazon, you cannot get the matte black version of this pen. You can only get the sort of ink splattered versions of this pen. So now that I've gone over that, I'm going to talk about one of the cons here. And this isn't necessarily specifically something for this pen, but like I said, this is a lacquered brass pen, and as you can see, some of the finish has gotten damaged on this pen, and you can see the brass underneath it. Anytime that you have a lacquered or like a lacquer finish over metal, it is going to be prone to damage and scratches and chipping. So, you know, like I said, I bought this pen. I paid $13.60 for it. I bought this with the intention of using it. Predominantly, I use this for drawing. So I've carried it around. This particular time, this right here, I made a mistake. I wasn't thinking. I clipped this in a pocket, and it happened to, for whatever reason, I clipped it into the same pocket where my pocket knife was clipped into my pocket, and my pocket knife scratched the cap on this pen. So that's where that finish damage you see right there is from. It is from me scratching this pen against my pocket knife. There is also a smaller scratch there, just barely noticeable. But you can see that indeed, yes, both the cap and body of this pen are brass underneath. I would say you're never really going to see it, but under the clip, if I pull the clip ball up, I don't know if that's going to show, but there is a little bit of finish chipping underneath that. You can't really hardly see it, not in the camera, from this camera angle. Now, all versions of this pen, I didn't mention that earlier, that I've seen have this chrome hardware, and all of them have the same shiny black finial and tail knob for the piston. Now, I would say this. On my particular pen, if you look at this cap, it has this kind of mottled texture almost all over. It's a sort of crazing texture. This is not necessarily due to any kind of wear, because for the most part this has been a desk pen, although I have carried it some. I think specifically with my pen and this cap, there might have been something that went wrong with my particular example of this pen. I think that some kind of a reaction with the finish on the cap itself, because those aren't like scratch patterns that would happen from carry. That looks more like what would be called finish checking or crazing in the finish, which can sometimes happen if something went wrong with a solvent. Sometimes if you're mixing finishes that are incompatible and a finish underneath starts to off-gas through the top coat it can cause that. Obviously, I don't think that's the case here. So there could have been some kind of contamination or something on the cap of my particular pen when it was finished that caused that, and also could be one of the reasons why it chipped more easily. I'm not sure. Of the other examples I've seen of this pen and other videos and things I've seen of other people who had this pen, I have not seen one that had that particular finish issue that mine seems to have. So I would say I probably got the lemon or the outlier in that case. You know, for what I paid for it, the $13, and for what I intend to use it for, a pen to carry around for art purposes, you know, obviously in carry I've already damaged that finish. That's not a big deal breaker to me, considering I was getting, you know, a metal-bodied size 6 nib piston fill pen for 13 bucks. I'm not going to complain about that, but like I said, my finish on my cap's a little bit of an outlier, but the finishes on these pens are a little bit more prone to damage. So, with that being said, and that's not just this, it's any metal-bodied pen that has a lacquered finish over top. If you want to carry this, especially if you've got the version that's got the ink blots with the glossy finish, you may want to consider carrying it in a pen case, you know, if you want it to keep it looking good. Or if you do put it in a pocket, make sure you put it in a pocket that you don't have anything else in, like a pocket knife or another metal pen or other types of metal utensils or your car keys or anything like that, because if they come in contact, there's a very good chance they will scratch and damage the finish on your pen. But that right there is really the only negative thing that I've had happen, or negative aspect of this pen for the time I've owned it. As far as the actual use of this pen, it works great. I'll do a quick little writing test here. So this is a piece of Blick white sulfite drawing paper. It's a sketching paper. So what is this? Well, I left it uncapped during the review, so it's wanting a hard start. But that hard starts are not something I've had a problem with if I don't leave it uncapped for extended periods. Majohn T5. Okay, there we go. As you can see, it is a fairly wet writing pen. Now, it is a extra fine. It's a Western extra fine. It's not a Japanese extra fine. If I want to put some pressure on this, you can coax some line variation out of this. Obviously, it's not a... It's not a... It's not a flex nib, okay, but you can kind of see you can force line variation out of it, but it is not a flex nib. But I may have lifted on that skip there. Well, okay, there's a couple of spots, but for the most part, it keeps up pretty good. Obviously, you're not really going to be writing at that speed, but, you know, as far as I've seen, it has gotten, especially, like I said, for an extra fine, really good flow. This is a really wet writing extra fine. It also does reverse write very well. So, if I can remember how to spell... And if you reverse write, it is dry, obviously, and very, very fine. So, very, very fine. Which, for me, drawing, I do a lot of hatching, you know, and tone work with reverse nib writing. And I do a lot of, like, detail work. Like, say, for instance, I want to draw something like an eye, like this, I'll go in and detail the iris with the reverse nib, and I'll also use the reverse nib. This is a little quick and dirty, but I'll use a reverse nib for things like eyelashes. And smaller details. So the fact that this flows really well and it flows good with that reverse nib is, you know, so I can get the most line variation possible with one pen. Obviously, we'd get maybe more if you had a flex nib. Is really great as far as a drawing, inking drawings. It's really great. I really enjoy drawing with this pen. Now, I guess I should have mentioned this earlier. The ink that I'm using right here is Noodler's Heart of Darkness. It's my go-to black ink. When I say it's my go-to black ink, I use a lot of it, and last time I went ahead and bought the big 16-ounce bottle to make sure I have plenty of it, because for what I do, inking drawings, sometimes I fill out an entire page with ink, and I can run through a lot of ink just in one drawing. So, you know, that's my chosen black ink, and that's why that's the particular ink that's in this pen. But all in all, I really enjoy this pen. Like I said, if you want to keep it pretty, you know, carry it in a case. And I mean, you know, that's not, you know, carrying it in a case isn't just particular to this pen. That's for any pen that is a metal body with a lacquered finish. They are more prone to damage if something hits them. You know, carry it in a case. Don't put it in a pocket with your pocket knife. Don't put it in a pocket with your keys. If you got it in a chest pocket, I would not put it in a pocket with any other, you know, metal pens or metal pencils. Like, for instance, if you're carrying it in there with your drafting pencil that has this knurled metal grip, well, that's going to end up chewing up the barrel of the pen. You know, either carry it by itself in a pocket or carry it in a pen case if you want to keep it looking pretty. If you're like me and, you know, you got it back when it, you know, if you're able to get it at that sort of $13 price or equivalent price in another country, because I don't think we're going to be seeing the $13 price for U.S. buyers anytime soon. But, you know, if you can get it for that low price and you want to just use it as an everyday drawing pen like I do, you know, at that point, you might not care as much about the aesthetics if it gets a little beat up, because it's, you know, something that you carry and use, which is kind of how this pen is for myself personally. Not necessarily because I have anything against the pen as far as taking care of it. It's just that, you know, it was a $13 well-functioning piston fit pen, and a piston pen has a much larger ink capacity than a cartridge converter pen. And for on-the-go drawing, that's great, because in my sketchbook that I typically use, which is, you know, this guy, it's a 7.5 by 5.5, I think, if I remember correctly. Excuse me, it's 8.5 by 5. If you, a little bigger than that, but 8.5 by 5 is roughly the size of the paper in the book. On some pens, if I'm doing a full page inking, like if I want to do a background, some kind of scenery, and I do a lot of hatching and tone work or stippling or whatever, and some pens, some cartridge converter pens, just doing inking one page can completely use up the ink in the converter. So having a larger capacity in a piston fill pen is really nice. It's just, you know, usually piston fill pens are more expensive acrylic, turned acrylic body pens, and something like that may not be something that you want to carry on the go all the time. So like I said, at the time I bought this, for a $13 metal bodied piston filler pen, something that I could carry on the go and, you know, use, and and not have to worry as much about it because it's not an extremely valuable pen. That's the main reason I bought this. So I sort of bought this to put it in a position where it might sustain damage. However, especially if you're somebody looking at this, you know, to add to a collection, or you wanted to keep it nice, because it is a fairly nice looking pen. Although I would say if you're that person, you'd probably be getting the glossy finished version with the little ink splatters and things on it. Like I said, you know, just be mindful of how you carry it so it's not banging into other things that will damage that finish. But all in all, I have been very happy with this pen. It has performed perfectly fine for me. Like I said, it is a quite wet flowing pen for an extra fine, which I'm perfectly fine with, especially when I'm drawing. It helps me to, you know, especially considering it is an extra fine, if I want to fill in a place with, you know, fully fill in a section, black something out, do hard shading, it's a lot easier to do it with this that is still an extra fine than some of my other extra fine pens, and I still have the capability to draw very fine lines for details and tone work. And so, you know, from my experience, and this is multiple months of using this pen, it has been a good, reliable pen. I have not really had a problem with this pen, you know, except for the damage that was caused by my careless carrying of it. But with having all that been said, that's pretty much going to do it for this video. You know, if you've watched this far to the end, I really thank you. I know my videos tend to be pretty long-winded, and if you know, you enjoyed the video, you thought it was informative, you got something out of it, I would really appreciate a thumbs up down there. That would really help me out. And, you know, if you've watched this video, maybe you've watched some of my other videos, you like the way I try to present my information, you know, you get some kind of entertainment, you've gotten some entertainment out of my videos, and you want to potentially see more in the future, then I'd really appreciate a subscription. That'd really also help me out. And, you know, if you have any questions about the pen, or maybe you have comments about it, maybe you have experience with this pen, maybe your experience contradicts my experience with your particular version of this pen. You know, if you have suggestions about anything that I said in this video about how I might correct them in the future, or you have criticisms or critiques, any of those things, all that feedback, positive and negative, both are helpful for me to help me make better videos. But also, potentially, if you have other information about your experience with this pen, it might help other viewers. So, you know, drop down there in the comment section and leave a comment about it. As of right now, I have low subscribers, I get low view counts, and I get very few comments, usually. So if you comment, I will see the notification, and I will reply back to you, or I will try to. And, you know, all of those kinds of comments down there are helpful. So, you know, feel free to say whatever you want down there. And with having said all that, I do thank you for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next video. Bye.